7 days, and then she comes for you. Samara Morgan isn't just a ghost. She's a curse, born from betrayal, drowned in darkness, and reborn through a videotape that kills. But who was she before the well? A tormented child with terrifying powers? A demon in human skin? Or something worse? Her story is fractured, her motives unclear: vengeance, or a desperate cry for a mother's love. One thing's certain: once you see her, she sees you, and she won't stop until her pain becomes yours. The lingering shadow of Samara Morgan. Few figures in modern American horror cast as long and distorted a shadow as Samara Morgan. Her emergence, heralded by a cursed videotape and a chilling 7-day deadline, tapped into a primal vein of fear at the turn of the millennium. The grainy, disjointed images on the tape, culminating in the terrifying spectacle of a long-haired girl in a white dress crawling inexorably from a television screen, became instantly iconic. This unsettling visual presence, derived from the Japanese onryo archetype, the vengeful spirit, often female, characterized by long black hair obscuring the face and a white burial kimono, was translated into a uniquely American nightmare. Yet beyond the visceral horror of her appearance and the relentless mechanism of her curse lies a fragmented, often contradictory narrative, an untold story rife with ambiguity. Who was Samara Morgan before she became the ghost in the well? What were the true origins of her terrifying powers? And what drives her unending cycle of vengeance? The initial premise is deceptively simple. Watch the tape, receive a phone call, and die in 7 days unless you condemn another by making them watch a copy. But Samara's impact extends far beyond this deadly game of transmission. Her story raises profound questions about the nature of evil, the failures of family and institutions, the corrupting influence of trauma, and the anxieties surrounding technology's pervasive reach. This report delves into the murky depths of Samara Morgan's lore as presented across the American film franchise, The Ring 2 Rings. It aims to piece together her tragic origins, trace the terrifying evolution of her psychic abilities, examine the horrific circumstances of her life and death, dissect the complex mechanics and motivations fueling her spectral rage, and analyze how subsequent narratives have attempted to expand or perhaps obscure the enigma of the girl in the well. By exploring these fragmented accounts and inherent contradictions, we can better understand the ambiguities that make Samara Morgan such an enduring and unsettling figure of dread. Whispers Before the Well, Unearthing Samara's Origins. The genesis of Samara Morgan is shrouded in conflicting narratives and whispered fears, making a definitive account of her birth elusive. The films present layers of information, often revised or retconned, leaving a core uncertainty about whether her malevolence was innate or forged through trauma. Biological parentage, Evelyn and the Seeds of Evil. The first film, The Ring, leaves Samara's biological origins largely untouched, focusing on her adoptive family. It is The Ring 2 that introduces Evelyn, portrayed by Sissy Spacek, a woman confined to a psychiatric institution revealed to be Samara's birth mother. Rachel Keller's investigation uncovers Evelyn's chilling confession. She attempted to drown the infant Samara in a fountain, claiming she was commanded by voices or visions to cleanse her of evil spirits or simply send it back. This attempt was apparently prompted by Samara's unnerving nature. Even as a newborn, she reportedly never cried, a silence that deeply disturbed Evelyn. Evelyn's actions led to Samara being put up for adoption and Evelyn's own institutionalization. This narrative suggests an inherent darkness within Samara, recognized and feared by her biological mother from the very beginning, possibly linked to supernatural or demonic influence. Hinted at by Evelyn's talk of evil spirits and potentially water-based demonic imagery she associated with her daughter. However, the third film, Rings, significantly alters this backstory. It introduces Galen Burke, Vincent D'Onofrio, a local priest who, according to this version, secretly imprisoned and repeatedly raped Evelyn, resulting in Samara's conception. Evelyn was supposedly only freed when she was 8 months pregnant. This retcon grounds Samara's origins not in the supernatural, but in profound human cruelty and trauma. It reframes Evelyn's actions as potentially stemming from the horror of her own ordeal and its product, rather than a response to inherent demonic evil in the child. Further complicating matters are fan theories and subtle hints that align more closely with the source material of the original Japanese novels. Some interpretations posit that Samara's father was not human, but a demonic entity associated with water, explaining Evelyn's intense fear of water and Samara's later manifestation of hydrokinetic powers. This resonates with Koji Suzuki's novels, where Sadako Yamamura's, Samara's counterpart, powers are linked to her mother Shizuko, uncovering a mystic relic associated with the sea entity En no Ozunu. This inconsistency across the films regarding Samara's parentage does more than create continuity issues. It cultivates a fundamental ambiguity about the very source of her malevolence. Is she the progeny of demonic influence, as Evelyn's fears and certain fan theories suggest? Or is she the tragic product of human depravity and trauma, as the Rings narrative posits with the introduction of Burke? Perhaps the truth lies closer to a mother's postpartum delusion, twisting an ordinary, if unusual, child into a perceived monster. This refusal to provide a definitive origin prevents any simple rationalization of Samara, amplifying the dread surrounding her unknowable nature. Adoption by the Morgans, a desperate hope on Moesco Island. Following Evelyn's institutionalization, the infant Samara was put up for adoption and eventually taken in by Anna and Richard Morgan. The Morgans were affluent, prize-winning horse breeders residing on the remote and picturesque Moesco Island, Washington. Anna, in particular, desperately longed for a child, having suffered multiple miscarriages. Richard, while supportive of his wife, appeared more reserved or perhaps hesitant about the prospect of adoption. They left Moesco Island for a period, returning with the young Samara claiming she was adopted. Adding another layer of confusion is the existence of a birth certificate discovered later, listing Anna and Richard Morgan as Samara's biological parents, this directly contradicts the adoption narrative they presented to the island community. Was this certificate a forgery to legitimize their claim to the child? Or did Anna, against prior difficulties, somehow conceive and carry Samara, with the adoption story serving as a cover for reasons unknown? This discrepancy remains unresolved, further obscuring Samara's true connection to the family that would ultimately seal her fate. Sources suggest there might have been a brief period of normalcy, a time when all's well on the Morgan Ranch after Samara's arrival. However, this fragile peace was shattered as Samara grew and her latent supernatural abilities began to manifest, inadvertently terrorizing her adoptive parents. The Morgan Ranch, envisioned by Anna as a sanctuary where her maternal dreams could finally be realized, tragically transformed into the crucible where Samara's destructive nature, whether inherent or reactive, would fully ignite. The stark contrast between the idyllic island setting and the escalating domestic horror underscores a recurring theme: the shattering of familial peace by an inexplicable internal threat that defies understanding and control. Anna's profound yearning for a child is met with a terrifying irony, as the child she receives becomes not a source of joy, but of relentless torment. Richard's pragmatism, perhaps rooted in fear, leads him to actions like confining Samara, a stark contrast to Anna's emotional disintegration. The isolation of Moisco Island only intensifies the sense of inescapable doom enveloping the Morgan family. The girl who never slept, psychic torment, and psychiatric scrutiny. Samara's childhood was defined by the emergence of extraordinary and terrifying psychic abilities, her profound isolation, and the failure of conventional systems to understand or contain her. Central to her disturbing nature was the power known as nensha, or thotography, and her unsettling state of perpetual wakefulness. Nensha, thotography, images burned into reality. Samara possessed a potent form of extrasensory perception identified as nensha, or projected thermography. This ability allowed her to psychically imprint or burn mental images onto physical surfaces, such as photographic film or wooden walls, as well as directly into the minds of living beings. These projected images were not benign. They were described as horrific, gruesome, and nightmarish visions that inflicted severe psychological torment on those exposed, most notably her adoptive mother, Anna. Initially, this power seemed to manifest uncontrollably, an unintentional byproduct of her presence or internal state. Samara herself offered only cryptic explanations when questioned during psychiatric evaluation, stating, "I see them, and then they just are." This suggests a lack of conscious mastery, at least in her younger years. Regardless of intent, the effect was devastating. Samara's nensha became a terrifying form of pathological communication. Isolated and potentially unable to connect or express herself through normal means her internal world, filled with pain, loneliness, confusion, or perhaps burgeoning malice, violently imprinted itself onto the external world and the minds of others. This forced exposure to her inner reality was a profound violation, mirroring her own potential feelings of otherness or alienation. A twisted, desperate method of compelling others to see and feel her existence. Other manifestations: hydrokinesis, pyrokinesis, and eternal wakefulness. Beyond dotography, evidence points to other disturbing abilities. Post-death, Samara demonstrates clear hydrokinesis, the power to manipulate water. This is seen when she causes water to recede from Aiden's bath, leak ominously from television sets before her emergence, or telekinetically move large volumes of water. This power holds a chilling thematic resonance, linking back to the element associated with her biological mother's fear and rejection, Evelyn's attempt to drown her, her eventual death by drowning in the well, and potential theories of an aquatic demonic origin. It represents a terrifying mastery over the very element that defined her trauma. There are also hints of pyrokinesis, the ability to manipulate fire, suggested by the burned wooden walls discovered in her barn room. This could symbolize the burning rage festering within her. Perhaps one of Samara's most defining and unsettling characteristics, present both in life and death, was that she never sleeps. This condition contributed significantly to her alienation and the fear she inspired. Theories suggest her frustration over this inability to sleep might have been misdirected towards the horses in the barn, blaming their noises for her perpetual wakefulness. This eternal restlessness underscores her relentless, inescapable nature. As a child, it marked her as fundamentally different. As a spirit, it ensures her haunting is perpetual, her influence never truly ceasing. A spirit that never rests offers no respite, embodying an unending curse. Eola County Psychiatric Hospital. Diagnosis or condemnation. The escalating disturbances led to both Samara and Anna being admitted to the Eola County Psychiatric Hospital. Anna was treated for severe depression, hallucinations, and suicidal ideation, all attributed to the mental torment inflicted by Samara's powers. Samara, meanwhile, was subjected to psychiatric observation and testing, where doctors, including a Dr. Scott, documented her Nensha abilities, capturing evidence on film. Videotapes from these sessions capture Samara discussing her powers, offering cryptic responses. One particularly chilling and ambiguous exchange occurs when the doctor suggests she doesn't want to hurt anyone. Samara replies, "But I do, and I'm sorry. It won't stop." This statement lies at the heart of the debate about her nature. Is it an apology for harm caused by powers she cannot control, or a chilling confession of malevolent intent coupled with a declaration that her destructive actions will continue indefinitely? The ambiguity is likely deliberate, preventing easy categorization. The hospital stay proved ineffective. One account suggests the situation escalated horrifically, with Samara allegedly killing Dr. Scott, whom she perhaps viewed as a pest, to be eliminated, after which the incriminating interview footage vanished. Another version states that Richard Morgan, distrustful of the psychiatric approach, or perhaps fearing what might be uncovered, terminated Samara's sessions against medical advice. and removed both his wife and Samara from the facility, opting for isolation instead. The psychiatric hospital, typically a place of diagnosis, treatment, and rational understanding, utterly fails when confronted with Samara. It becomes merely a site for documenting the inexplicable, unable to contain or comprehend the nature of her abilities or intent. This failure highlights the limits of science and reason in the face of the supernatural horror Samara represents, reinforcing her position as something fundamentally other and uncontrollable. Richard's intervention, rejecting institutional methods for confinement, proves equally futile, merely shifting the location of the inevitable eruption. The horse incident, escalation of terror. Following their return from Eola County, Richard Morgan confined Samara to the loft of the family's horse barn, ostensibly to protect Anna and perhaps prevent further harm to the community. This isolation, however, likely bred further resentment, loneliness, and boredom in the perpetually awake child. Confined and possibly testing the limits of her abilities or lashing out in rage, Samara turned her powers onto the Morgans' cherished horses. She bombarded the animals with horrific mental images, driving them into a frenzy of terror. This culminated in a gruesome mass suicide, as dozens of the prize-winning horses were driven to leap off a nearby cliff, drowning themselves in the sea below. This horrific event garnered significant media attention and had a devastating impact on the Morgans, particularly Anna, who deeply loved the horses and may have been readmitted to psychiatric care as a result. The horse incident represents a critical turning point. It demonstrated Samara's capacity for large-scale, devastating psychic violence, extending her influence beyond the immediate family to affect their livelihood and the wider environment. Whether an act of deliberate cruelty or an uncontrolled manifestation of her power and isolation, it likely solidified the perception of Samara as an irredeemable monstrous threat, particularly in the eyes of her tormented adoptive mother, pushing Anna closer to her final desperate act. The attempt to contain Samara through confinement paradoxically seems to have unleashed an even greater destructive force. 7 days drowning, murder, rage, and rebirth as vengeance. The culmination of Samara's tormented life and the catalyst for her spectral rebirth was a horrific act of filicide, followed by an agonizing period of survival that would forever define the nature of her curse. Anna's breaking point. The murder at Shelter Mountain Inn. Driven to the brink of sanity by years of psychic torment, the constant onslaught of horrific visions, and likely shattered by the mass suicide of her beloved horses, Anna Morgan resolved to end the nightmare. During a purported family retreat to the Shelter Mountain Inn, Anna enacted her plan. She first suffocated Samara, likely with a black plastic garbage bag, and then cast her seemingly lifeless body into an old, deep well hidden beneath the floorboards of their rented cabin, Cabin 12. Anna's motivations appear tragically complex. It was an act born of utter desperation to end her own suffering and, perhaps, a perceived need to protect others from Samara's destructive influence. Yet, it was also intertwined with her failed maternal desires. Just before committing the act, she reportedly told Samara, "You were all I ever wanted," highlighting the terrible paradox of her actions. This wasn't simply cold-blooded murder. It was a devastating expression of love, twisted into annihilation by unbearable psychological pain. This act positions Anna as both a perpetrator of horrific violence and a victim of Samara's inescapable influence, complicating any simple assignment of blame. Some accounts suggest Richard Morgan may have been present or assisted Anna, particularly in moving the heavy stone lid to seal the well, though his exact role remains ambiguous. 7 days of suffering, the well and the will to endure. Crucially, Samara was not dead when thrown into the well. She survived the fall and the initial suffocation attempt, regaining consciousness in the cold, dark water below. Trapped beneath the heavy stone lid, she endured unimaginable suffering for 7 days. During this period, she desperately clawed at the rough stone walls, trying to climb out, breaking her fingernails in the futile attempt. The last image seared into her consciousness was the shrinking circle of light as Anna sealed the well lid, extinguishing her final hope of escape. Eventually, after 7 days of terror, isolation, and physical agony, Samara succumbed to a combination of drowning, starvation, and exposure. This specific duration, 7 days, is not merely a biographical footnote, it is the foundational trauma that dictates the temporal structure of her posthumous vengeance. The curse she later unleashes forces her victims to mirror her own agonizing countdown to inevitable death, reliving the helpless, protracted torment she endured in the well. Rebirth as vengeance. The Onryo emerges. Death did not bring peace or oblivion for Samara, fueled by the immense suffering of her life and the agonizing betrayal and horror of her final 7 days. Her spirit transformed into a powerful, vengeful entity akin to the Japanese Onryo. Her consciousness remained anchored to the well, her existence now defined by overwhelming rage and an insatiable desire for revenge against a world she felt had tormented and ultimately destroyed her. She became a waiting malignancy, seeking only an opportunity to be set free and unleash her pain onto others. Her vengeance eventually claimed those directly responsible for her suffering. Anna Morgan, plagued by guilt and possibly continued psychic assaults from Samara's dying consciousness or newly formed spirit, later committed suicide by throwing herself from a cliff overlooking the sea. Richard Morgan endured years of torment, haunted by hallucinations and the knowledge of what he had allowed to happen before finally taking his own life via electrocution upon realizing Samara's curse had been unleashed upon the world through the videotape. Samara's transformation exemplifies a cycle where profound trauma does not dissipate, but metastasizes, breeding more suffering. Her pain radiates outward, consuming not only her tormentors, but extending indefinitely to ensnare countless innocent victims in her unending quest for retribution. The viral curse, anatomy of Samara's revenge. Years after Samara's death, her rage found a unique and terrifying vector for its expression, a simple VHS videotape. This became the conduit through which her suffering could be endlessly replicated, spreading like a contagion through the very technology designed for communication and entertainment. The cursed videotape, genesis and content. The catalyst for the curse's physical manifestation occurred when developers built rental cabins on the land, encompassing the old Morgan property, including the site of the well. Cabin 12 of the Shelter Mountain Inn was constructed directly over Samara's watery grave. Trapped but potent, Samara utilized her Nensha ability one last time while confined to the well. She psychically projected her consciousness, her fragmented memories, her pain, and her undiluted rage onto a blank VHS tape inadvertently left recording in the VCR within Cabin 12. The resulting tape is not a coherent narrative, but a disturbing, surreal montage of seemingly disconnected and nightmarish images, each bearing some symbolic relation to Samara's life and death. Viewers glimpse cryptic fragments, the iconic ring of light, the view from the bottom of the well, Anna Morgan obsessively brushing her hair in a mirror, the cliff where Anna later died, a lone chair spinning eerily, a ladder falling inexplicably, the beach littered with the corpses of the drowned horses, unsettling close-ups of insects like writhing maggots or a crawling fly, Richard Morgan looking down from an upper window, and recurring shots of the well itself. This videotape is far more than a mere recording. It functions as a psychic vessel, a direct conduit for Samara's malevolent will and power. Watching it infects the viewer's mind, planting the seed of Samara's curse. The use of a ubiquitous, mundane object like a VHS tape grounds the supernatural horror in the familiar, transforming everyday technology into a carrier for a lethal contagion. This taps into latent technophobia, anxieties about the unseen dangers lurking within mass media, and the uncontrollable proliferation of harmful images or ideas. Samara effectively weaponizes the medium, turning passive viewing into an active death sentence. The rules of the curse, 7 days, and the copy loophole. The mechanics of the curse are brutally simple and relentless. Upon viewing the tape, the victim receives a cryptic phone call, sometimes a voice whispering 7 days, sometimes just an ominous ring, signaling the start of the countdown. Exactly 1 week later, to the minute, the viewer will die a horrific death at Samara's hands. There exists only one known way to break this fatal appointment. The victim must make a copy of the cursed videotape and ensure that another person watches it before their own 7 days expire. This act spares the copier but condemns the new viewer, thus perpetuating the cycle and ensuring Samara's vengeance continues its spread. The curse propagates virally, passed from person to person through an act of self-preservation. Crucially, this loophole is not a flaw in the curse, but its intended function. Samara's ultimate goal isn't just to kill individuals, but to ensure her suffering is endlessly disseminated, her rage infinitely replicated. Those who choose to copy the tape are not escaping her influence. They are becoming active participants in it, saving themselves by sacrificing another. This mechanism creates a horrifying ethical trap. It forces victims into a terrible moral compromise, aligning their primal survival instinct with the antagonist's desire for perpetual suffering. The curse spreads not through overt force, but through the exploitation of fear and self-interest, ensuring its own continuation and blurring the line between victim and unwitting accomplice. Samara's manifestations, haunting and killing. The 7-day period between watching the tape and the fatal encounter is marked by escalating supernatural torment designed to break down the victim's psyche. Viewers experience disturbing phenomena, vivid hallucinations featuring imagery from the tape or Samara herself, dead horses, impossible objects like ladders in hallways, crawling insects, terrifying nightmares often involving direct contact with Samara, physical symptoms like spontaneous nosebleeds, and even tangible injuries such as bruises appearing on their arms after being grabbed by Samara in a dream. Samara's presence bleeds into reality. She can appear fleetingly in reflections or be captured, distorted in photographs, even when not physically visible. As a spirit, Samara wields considerable power over the physical environment. She demonstrates hydrokinesis, causing water to seep from technology or manipulating it directly. She exhibits telekinesis, moving heavy objects like televisions, pulling nails from floorboards, or unlocking doors. She may also exert influence over animals, causing deer to attack inexplicably or horses to react in terror to those marked by her curse. The curse culminates in Samara's physical manifestation, often preceded by water leaking from the screen. Blast. She emerges directly from a television set, her body moving with unnatural, jerky contortions. Her final attack is swift and devastating. It suggested that her direct gaze, or perhaps her mere presence, imbued with overwhelming psychic terror, induces fatal cardiac arrest, leaving the victim's face frozen in a grotesque mask of unimaginable horror. Samara's methods systematically dismantle the victim's reality, blurring the lines between the mundane world, the technological interface, and her encroaching supernatural influence, making the 7-day countdown a period of inescapable psychological disintegration, culminating in physical annihilation. A mother's touch, a spreading stain, deconstructing Samara's motives, understanding what truly drives Samara Morgan remains one of the most unsettling aspects of her character. Is she purely a vessel of vengeance, or is there a more complex, perhaps even pitiable, motivation hidden beneath the layers of spectral rage? The films, particularly the sequels, offer conflicting clues, creating a chilling ambiguity about her ultimate desires: vengeance versus connection, the duality of Samara's goal. The enduring horror of Samara lies not only in the visceral fear she evokes, the primal dread of drowning, darkness, the uncanny valley of her movements, but also in the unresolved questions that swirl around her like the static on her cursed tape. What is the true source of her evil? Can her cycle of suffering ever be broken? What are the limits of her spectral reach? The sequel's attempts to elaborate often served only to deepen the contradictions, reinforcing the notion that some horrors resist easy explanation. This inherent ambiguity allows Samara to function as a powerful, multifaceted symbol, reflecting contemporary anxieties about media saturation, the fragility of family, the devastating legacy of trauma, and the inexplicable nature of pure malice. Samara Morgan remains terrifying precisely because her story is never fully told. Her nature never definitively pinned down. She is the silence that unnerves, the image that persists after the screen goes dark, the unresolved trauma threatening to crawl back into the world at any moment. Her legacy is one of perpetual, unblinking, and ultimately unknowable dread.